The founders gave us a blueprint, but sometime around 1913, things got a little off track, right? Let's get into how we went from limited government to an unlimited bureaucracy, and we love to blame Woodrow Wilson around here, MP.
That's true. That's one of the things that Glenn Beck did way back in the day, is point out to American conservatives that the progressive era is really the beginning of a lot of the stuff that we complain about now, and we see some bad fruit come out of. But you really have to start with the fact that the entire Western world, I'm going to get fancy here, but it's really simple stuff. The entire Western world, post-Civil War, between the Civil War and 1900, basically rejects the old idea of nature that the founders had. So, Thomas Jefferson was no card-carrying Christian. He famously wrote the miracles out of the Bible. But he read the Bible closely in order to take the miracles out, because he thought Christ was the greatest moral teacher, and he thought that reason showed you that, of course, there's a God who acts in human affairs over time, and of course there's good and evil, and reason and religion tell you the same thing. And roughly speaking, Aristotle's ethics, or what you can study in fancy school, is the same thing as what Christianity said. So he thought basically the morality of Christianity was correct. And he's an outlier. Like in Washington's farewell address, he goes out of his way to say, you need morality and you need religion. Indispensable supports, twin pillars, the entire government's based on that. And if you just have morality, yes, there should be some fancy minds out there like Jefferson, but that doesn't work. You need the Christian religion. So once between 1850 and 1900, the entire Western world, the intellectuals reject this idea of God and nature that everything was based on. Things start to go off the rails, and the first universities in America, I blame the professors for anything. Woodrow Wilson was a professor. He was the president of Princeton University. Don't elect the PhDs. And he gets in there, and he's kind of the culminating force of what was going on in those universities, which was a rejection of the principles of the American Republic. And that was over a century ago. And that battle has gone back and forth. Sometimes after World War II, we had a surge of patriotism and pride and sort of return to God in some ways. But the whole century, it really starts then. And so guys like Wilson and even FDR, there's a lot of great things they did, but these are people who, by and large, really didn't care or outright rejected the principles of the American founding.
Yeah, with Woodrow Wilson, we get the 16th Amendment, we get the 17th Amendment, the Federal Reserve, which I could do an entire hour on. We get all of the central banking that the founders never had intended for this country. But Chris, I want to ask you, right? We went through and we got to the phase where the Constitution was a living document and judicial activism. What's the biggest part of where you see this country getting off track? What is it for you? What stands out?
I think popularly elected senators was a serious, major issue for the American public. I know that us nerds like to point out, and I bet most of the people watching, that we are a republic, not a democracy, but we certainly look a lot more like a democracy than we used to when this country was founded. And having different competing interests was really important all around the country. That was an essential aspect where the senator from Massachusetts wasn't just pushing the left-wing cause in perfect hand-holding harmony with the senator from California, and the senator from Texas wasn't allied all the time with the senator from Florida on what they were pushing and what policy they had, because they came there and represented their state and its interests. Now, of course, that leads to different kinds of issues as well, and you do want someone who is answerable to more than just themselves. Of course, those people are answerable to the state legislatures. So the chipping away at that over the years while at the same time decreasing civics education so that a number of Americans couldn't name their senators or name their congressmen makes them so that they are similarly unaccountable the way that they once were. But at least the state houses and the state senates paid more close attention to what they were doing and making sure that they were representative. And then you've got, of course, just the way that the parties have shaken out have been really good in some ways, but also really bad in some other ways. Republican Party used to be regional. Everything was regional for 100 years after the American Civil War. Republicans were in the North and Democrats were in the South. Now, that started to change. The Democrats went more towards exactly what Matt was talking about, the progressivism and the liberalism. But there's no more conservative Democrats, really. And the very few that remain, like Maybe you could point out someone like Eric Adams. He got pushed out of the party. Or the former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, who was a pain in the butt left-wing lunatic under the Barack Obama years. But when you look at the party now, he stands on its right flank. Those guys are so rare, and they don't really seem to have a choice or an option. Republicans still have a lot of liberal Republicans. It's a major problem all throughout. But still, then, there's much more ideological aspects to the parties these days. It probably makes low information voting certainly a lot easier, but some of the interests and the competition are lost. And that competition being lost in the legislature is one of the reasons you have this imperial judiciary, this imperial executive in some ways, where they're not even jealous of their own power. So I'm curious, actually, to Matt, the Federalist Papers didn't predict this. They thought that it was part of man's nature to simply jealously guard his power and not focus on his social media profile and his fundraising numbers instead. How did that go so wrong?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would blame in part the formation of elites who don't have a sense of their own fame or honor tied to defending the institution. So if the best you can do is being popular on social media, right, and you want to get out of it quick and get the money in chicks, as Bob Dylan once said, if that's what you want, okay, then that's what you'll get. But what you point to is important, because when you change the structure of the thing, right, that's the progressives really did change some of the structure of it. And like you said, I mean, only one half, right, of the three branches, one half of them was popular elected officials, and that was the House. The Senate wasn't, the president isn't, and we've democratized that as well. So once you do that, then I think you make it harder. You make it harder for them to care about the institution as much. But I think you're right. There's a problem with elite may be a too fancy of a word, but with leadership in America not wanting or seeing their fame, their honor, what they're known for being tied to defending the institution. And really, they've been overcome, though, right? The institution almost doesn't have power, right, because of the oligarchic, because of the wealthy interests that want all the money, and because we created this administrative state apparatus. It's like an alternative. You get a lot of people, I guess, who defend their interests there, as we see now, as this administration tries to take over. And you see people, either going native or adopting the arguments of certain agencies once they get in there. So that still exists, but we have a real problem there. We have a real problem. We have to bring back some kind of self-interest tied to the Senate. But also, they'd have to see that, right? They'd have to see someone who gains notoriety and gets the statue for, boldly defending the power of an institution of Congress.
And you even see that with the oligarchy. It's so coastal now.
Yes.
The original or earlier manufacturers and the wealthy and the industrialists were spread throughout the country. There was very wealthy and powerful men in the Midwest, in the South, in the Northeast, and in the West. And now you see so many of them are just in New York or Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Texas, of course, has some as well. But the spread of business, the concentration of business in the capitals of finance, as opposed to in the heartland, has led to some of the undermining even of that power and the way it's spread out in our country.
Yeah, and I mean, really, the answer to your question really should be the rise of the administrative state, because I don't think people in Congress can even envision not being a creature of that thing at this point, or that's a scary thought for most of them.
So big.
And if they do see themselves as a leader like a McConnell, they're sort of managers of the administrative state, right? Moving around funding and that sort of thing. Advanced managers who move funding, but still creatures. Yeah.